Tov. First of all, we should introduce Chaim to Eitan. Eitan, say hi. Stephen. Hananel, Michael, Aryeh, and Benjamin. Youngest students, yes, outside. Okay. Welcome. Okay, from America.
Yes, Washington, D.C. most recently.
Washington, D.C. I won't hold it against you. Sounds good. So yesterday we mentioned that perhaps it's important to read Hebrew. Thank you, sir. Oh, you're so nice. Thank you.
I need the exercise.
Pass these around, please. We mentioned that it's very important to know how to read, read Hebrew even. And Chaim, you've just been studying Hebrew in Ulpan, right?
Yes.
How'd that go for you?
It's slow, but getting there.
It's not an easy language. Your Aleph Bet,
Yeah, I can do the alphabet. I can read with the Nikud slowly.
Perfect. Okay, good. So, well, many of us, of course, are still praying in English till we get the Hebrew down. And but when it comes to reading Hebrew, we said that it's important to read Hebrew precisely as possible. In which section of the prayers?
Shema.
The Shema. That's Shema. It was Shema. Thank you so much, sir. In the Shema. The Shema. And then we realized that is it still on the board yesterday? Yeah, we said that there's perhaps three layers of trying to read Hebrew properly. There's, of course, the consonants, the letters themselves. Then there's the nikud. Nikud is another word for it. It's the tnuot. It's the vowels. It's what makes it gives you the movement of the letters, how to move them, how to we call them in English vowels. That's the tnuot nikud. That's the dots. Sometimes it's called the dots. And then we found in the Torah, when someone's reading from the Torah, there's an extra set of a notation system that's called Ta'amei Mikra, or the trop, or the cantillation notes, which serve three functions. One is musical notes, you've got to know how to sing. The other one is punctuation, how to punctuate. And last but not least, is it also help you pronounce the words with the right emphasis on the right syllable. So we just said a few words about that, and I realized that perhaps we should clarify a little more some basic reading skills. I was saying that when I taught people bar mitzvah, how to read from the Torah, everybody focuses on how do you sing it. But really, the fundamental basis for being a good reader from the Torah is to know how to read. Forget about singing. It's about how to say the words properly. So on this page, I'm sorry it's all in Hebrew. There is another book that I have. I couldn't find it. I looked all over the house. It took me a long time. Maybe that's why I'm late. I don't know. I looked all over the house. It's called the Tiferet HaKri'ah. I'll look it up and see if you can get it. I don't think it's in the bookstores anymore. It's an old book. That's in English, but this book here that I have here. It's a lovely little book, also probably out of print. Comes with a game. One day I'll show you the game as well. It's primarily about Ta'amei Mikra, as you can see, Ta'amei Mikra. It even has the cantillation notes on top of it, and just like I drew on the board yesterday for the brown notation marks, the Zakef Katon, that Nachta, the Sof Pasuk we spoke about. But in the introduction, he has, before I teach you all the musical notes, let's talk about reading properly. So, what you have in front of you is a chart. You can write it in English what it is. And on the right-hand side, it's a chart that says Hatnu'ah equals Nikud. You see that's the vowels. And there's three types of vowels. Probably didn't learn that in Ulpan. Okay, so three categories of vowels. The one on the right-hand side is called Tnu'ah Gdola, the middle is Tnu'ah Ktana, and the left is Chatzi Tnu'ah. Tnu'ah Gdola, in I think the way it's usually described in English, is a long vowel. Tnu'ah Ktana is a short vowel.
Here's that in front.
Shalom Aleichem. Rav Menachem Listman. That's Chaim. Chaim, Rav Menachem Listman. You met? Yeah. You're old friends.
2 months ago.
Okay, great. And
Anu. Called Israel Assis Achiv Shel Lemuel.
Wow. What a pleasure to see you. Welcome. Come on in. Okay, great. Come on in. What's your name again?
Israel.
Israel.
Yes, I have watched many shiurim from Rabbi and from YouTube.
Really?
This one many times.
Amazing. Wow. We're so happy to have you. And please give our best to Lemuel. Wow. You look similar, and it's such a pleasure to have our former student Lemuel. He was here, 3 years ago? Something like that. And now he's up in the north, in Migdal.
Yes.
In Migdal. Good. So anyways, Yisrael, welcome. Glad to have some new blood here. And we're learning just a brief mini lesson on how to read Hebrew. Something they don't tell you in Ulpan. Something they don't tell you in kindergarten. But when you study a little bit more in depth, there's actually 3 types of vowels. Long vowels, short vowels, and the third column is a half a vowel. It's like not long or not short. It's like in between. So let's look at the long vowels, the tnu'a gdola. Tnu'a is another word for vowel, or something that it means movement, right? So it's something that moves, makes the consonants move. So the first one is called kamatz gadol. It's the plus sign, like the half plus, over here on the right hand side, top right. There's 3 columns. You see that? So it's kamatz gadol and tzirei, a sound, chirik gadol, cholam, and shuruk. Now, what I wanted to show you is that in parallel, it really should be like a table or a chart. You should have an arrow from one to the next, because there is the equivalent short vowel. So kamatz gadol is a long vowel, and patach is the short one. Tzirei, if I use the Ashkenazi translation, pronunciation, it's a longer sound, and segol is a or e. So you see they're connected. They're 2 versions of the same thing, the long version and the short version.
Tzere is A.
Yes, tzere is a, and segol is e. It's like the same sound, but it's shorter. Emet, correct, yes, very good. Chirik gadol, and the shorter version of it is called chirik katan. Very simple, right? Chirik gadol, chirik katan. What's the difference? Whether there's a yud or not. You see that on the right-hand column, there's a yud. Number 3, you see that, on the left-hand side, there's no yud. There's just an aleph without any yud. Chirik katan or chirik gadol. Yes.
The chirik katan looks very much like the kamatz. How you will know that it's not this?
No, it looks like a chirik. 1 dot. Only referring to the dot. The dot underneath the aleph. You see that?
Yes.
You skipped a line. You skipped a line.
Chirik gadol, the E.
No, the chirik gadol is in the right-hand column,
Oh, okay.
and chirik katan is in the left-hand column. You see, those 2 columns should be make lines to make sure you can see one to the other. It's like a table. Is that clear? No. Give me your page. Give me your pen, because mine doesn't work. Show you that each one compares and contrasts to the other. The chirik gadol, it has the yud after it, and the chirik katan does not have the yud after it. It's the same 1 dot, right? For the tzere and the sagol, you have 2 different symbols. One is 2 dots and one is 3 dots. You see that? You go from the 2 dots on the right-hand column, and on the left-hand, the middle column, it's 3 dots. There's 2 names. Tseire and segol. What? And E is the same.
This one
Hey.
was E.
No. Let me show you. I've been talking about that. This connects to this. Like that. Throughout the whole column like that. That's what I've been talking about. Okay?
The next one is similar to the first one.
Oh, wait a minute. You're let's skip that and go to the last one in the column. Shuruk. Shuruk is an U sound, right? You see the aleph vav on the right hand in the bottom?
Yes.
Huh. And the tznuah ktana is a kubutz. It makes the same sound. U. One is long, one is short. Usually you don't know the difference, you don't notice the difference, and that's why they don't teach it to you in Opan. But if you want to be precisely reading, we're going to see it has a tremendous difference for other things. We'll see in a minute. Now the fourth one on your list is where it gets confusing. On the right-hand side, Tznuah Gdolah, we have something called a cholam. Cholam, O, right? You have a little dot to the left of the letter, makes the O sound. And on the left-hand side, it makes the very similar sound, also the O. You see, it's called, though, kamatz katan. Kamatz katan, it looks very much like a kamatz gadol. It looks exactly the same. Did anybody see where kamatz gadol was? It was the first one in the first column.
Yes, sorry.
That's what's confusing.
But that was what I didn't read good. I thought that this was here the Hamatz Katan, but this was like, this sounds similar like this.
Exactly. It looks exactly the same. And it changes to a different pronunciation depending on the context. So if you think Hebrew is a difficult language, it's just got more difficult. You thought, I'll just follow the dots. I'll know how to pronounce it. It's not enough to know the signs because sometimes it's pronounced differently. Sometimes the kamatz, that little plus sign, or the T, right, the little T, sometimes it's pronounced A, that's a kamatz gadol, gadol, A. Sometimes it's pronounced O, just like a cholam. Like a cholam is O. There's another, sometimes this notation, the T sign underneath the word, it actually should be pronounced O. The best example is, you find it many, many times in the Torah. The word kol, 2 letters. Kol, all, right? Kol haolam kulo, geshet. How is it usually written in the Torah? With a plus sign underneath the chaf.
People think kal.
You never should pronounce it kal, because it's a kamatz katan. It has a O sound. Kol. That's why in modern Hebrew, most people throw out the kamatz and they put in the cholam, the one dot after the chaf, and then it's clear that it should be pronounced kol. But even if it has a kamatz underneath it, it's a kamatz katan, and that should be pronounced O. Okay, so it's confusing. But
Is
yeah.
there anything in the text that would indicate that, or do we just kind of have to know?
Most texts, no.
Okay.
Some texts, they got smart. They realized, hey, everybody's making this mistake. Nobody knows how to distinguish between a plus sign or a T that should be pronounced A and that should be pronounced O. So we're going to make up a new notation system. And so they have in many sidurim, they make the kamatz, whenever it's a kamatz katan, which is the minority. Most of the kamatzim, 95%, are kamatz gadol. It's A sound. So, it's the exception. Like kol, I said, that's an exception. That's one word out of, 100. So most of them are kamatz katan. And so those they leave with the regular notation, the plus sign, like it has on your page. What some do is that they extend the leg. Or, so you have 2 ways of making the kamatz, right? That's the regular kamatz. So sometimes, to make a kamatz katan, they'll make it longer. They'll make it look like this. Or another way is you could bold it. Sometimes they'll bold it and make it thicker. And that's just a modern notation to help us plebeians who are not experts at diktuk to know when it's a kamat gadol and when it's a kamat katan. You're looking at your siddur. Did you find it?
I did. It's in this one. It's a little bit bolder and a little bit longer.
Bolder and longer, exactly. Beautiful. Great. Which word? Which one? Kol?
Bakol.
Bekol. Very perfect. Yeah. Where did you find that word bekol?
It is in the description of the priestly functions. Laws of offerings.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Very good. So they help you out sometimes in the modern printings, but the original just is the same. It's the same notation, but it has two different pronunciations. Confusing, right? For the most part, 95% the kamatz is a kamatz gadol. It has the ah sound. By the way, in modern Hebrew, many people don't know the difference between a kamatz gadol and a patach. They both sound the same, kamatz gadol. Now here, the Ashkenazi tradition and the Yemenite tradition, they have a leg up. They actually have something better. Because in order to make that distinction between a kamatz gadol and a patach, they pronounce the kamatz halfway towards the O, a little bit like an O. And a patach is the A. So they actually pronounce the kamatz gadol different than the patach. Even though for most of the Sfardim, they don't make any difference. Also, the tzerei and the segol, A or E. Modern Hebrew, we make no distinction. Eile, the word eile has 2 dots under the aleph. Eile, 3 dots under the lamed. Sfardim just say ele, not eile, but ele. Exact same. Sounds, the tzerei and the segol sound the same. The kamatz and the patach sound the same. The chirik gadol, for everybody, it sounds the same. And the chirik gadol and the chirik katan, it's just E. You can't really notice the difference. And the cholam and the kamatz katan, they sound the same, O sound. And the shuruk and the kibbutz sound the same. So pretty much, these are two equivalent. If you look underneath the column, there's a trick. It's in a box. You see the box?
2 boxes, yeah?
2 boxes. The right-hand box, it's a verse. Sod hu lireav. It's a form of a verse. The actual verse is Sod Hashem lireav. But if you notice, those 3 words encompass all of the long vowels. You see the cholam in the word sod. You see the shuruk in the word hu. And you see the chirik gadol, tzerei, and the kamatz gadol in the word lireav. So in 3 words, you have all of the long vowels. Sod, hu, lireav. And in the second box, you have another 3 words. Nicham, kol, muke. You have the chirik katan, you have the patach, you have the kamatz katan, the kol, and muke, you have the kubutz and the segol. So as if you want to remember which ones are which, you can remember these 3 words. Nicham kol muke is the tnuot ktanot, and sod hu le'reav is the tnuot gdolot. Then we have something called, the last column, the 3rd column, is half movement, just a little bit. The chataf patach, chataf segol. It's just like the ones we have, they're just a little shorter. It's the ah sound. Chataf patach, we pronounce it as ah, but it's actually sort of forced to become an ah sound when it really should be just a no sound. So similarly, the chataf segol, chataf kamat, and then we have the shvana and the shvanach, and this is where all hell breaks loose. The last one in the 3rd column. What's it called? The 2 dots underneath the letter. No. 3rd column. Sheva na and sheva nach. The 2 dots underneath the letter is called a sheva. Shava. Shava has no
I
sound.
find it the hardest one for the.
It's hard. Why?
Because sometimes, I don't know, like, let me say, this word, let me say, with the shin, the vav, you can say shiva or java or shva. I don't. Some people say you have to say it like a, or some say just the sound like.
Very good. So as you can see in the column itself, in the list, it actually has two names. There's two types: shva na and shva nach. Na means moving, and nach means resting. A resting shva has one sound, pretty much no sound, and shva na is a moving shva. It has a little bit of movement. So guess what? There's no indication in the text whether it's this kind of shva or that kind of shva, but the modern printings have made up. Just like the Siddur, if you look it up, you'll see it. Your Siddur, sometimes the shava, the way they do the same type of thing. It's the same two dots. Sometimes it'll be, like in some Siddurim, they actually turn them into diamonds. So that you know it's a shava na. Or they'll just make them bigger. As opposed to just, that's the shva nach, the resting shva. It is less of a sound. And the shava na will be, now, if you really want to know the diktuk, I'm not going to teach you, but look below, underneath the boxes, there's Aleph Bet Gimel Daled Hey. You see that?
Yeah.
Bottom right-hand side of the page?
Okay.
Aleph Bet Gimel Daled Hey. It means that there's 5 rules for when a shava becomes a shava na. I'm just going to show you Aleph. Aleph, it means when you have a shava on the first letter. Aleph's the beginning, right? So it's the first letter of a word. So, for example, you see at the end of the line where it says Aleph, it says Le'olam. And the word we studied yesterday in the Torah, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. How do you pronounce that? So, if I'm going to transliterate the Shema, right? The Shema looks like this. It's got the Shava underneath the Shin. It has this that's called a Shava. But the truth is, there's 2 types of Shava. I don't know which it is. Is it a Shva na or a Shva nach? They both look the same. So how do I know? 5 rules. First rule is, it's on the first letter of the word. Hey, in this, it's on the first letter of the word. That's why it's going to be a shva na. Shva na has a little more movement to it. And therefore, I would write it sheva. I had the I in there. Right here, I wrote it without an E, because that's more appropriate for the shva na. And so therefore, if I'm going to translate the word Shema, I'm going to write Shema. It's not Shema. It's Shema. She, as opposed to Shema. That E adds in the little movement because it's a shva na. Shema, not Shema. Okay?
So always on the beginning it becomes the.
If it's on the first, take a look on the left column. You have a word here. It's the first word in the Torah. You might recognize it. Bereshit. It's not Bereshit. It's not br. It's Bereshit because it's a shvana. There's a little bit of a. It's not quite an E sound. It's not quite an A sound. It's an sound. It's a little bit of movement to the shva usually. But take a look at the next word, where let's say a word where we find here a shva that is a shva nach.
In the yara.
Yadcha. Well, actually, that's not a good example because that's a shva na as well. Because a shva na after a tnu'a gdola, that's what I wanted to show you. Look at the bottom column in the right hand side. Aleph Bet Gimel Daled Hey, right? Gimel is if the shva comes after tnu'a gdola. What's a tnu'a gdola? this list. Up above, remember I taught you the list. The right-hand column, we divide up the vowels into two types, long vowels and short vowels. If the shva comes after a long vowel, it's a shva na. And so yadcha. It's not yadcha, but yadcha. So your example was actually an example of a shva na. Okay?
One question.
Yes.
Question. What I also find out, when you see the aleph with Tarzan, so how you have to pronounce it? Because
Aleph with a shva, you can't pronounce it. Really.
What you do, you just say nothing.
Usually you say nothing.
Okay.
Well, by the way, you should know, look at the back, again, at the word Bereshit. You see the word Bereshit? There's no dots, you don't pronounce it. So it's silent. There are silent letters.
Just for the fun.
It's not for fun. It's actually, believe it or not, I'll do one more thing and then we'll stop. Because I don't want the whole shiur to be on diktuk. Although, I like it. It's interesting. It's very important to know how to read properly. But I think people are going to start falling asleep. So I'll just teach you one more thing, which is a really good thing to know. We mentioned that there's consonants, which, there's what a consonant is, right? And then there's vowels. So the vowels, nowadays we have a notation system. We have dots. But there are some consonants out of the 22 letters of the alphabet, the aleph, bet, there are 4 letters. 4 letters from the aleph, bet are actually dual purpose. Sometimes they make a sound, like a consonant, and sometimes they serve as a vowel. Anybody know what they are?
Aleph.
Aleph is one.
Vav.
Vav.
Yud.
Yud. And Hey. They're known as the letters Ehevi. Ehevi. It's for the Aleph. He. And Vav and Yud. Ehevi. So these 4 letters, sometimes, like vai, 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 you hear the V. It's with a Vav. The Vav is a consonant. Right? Vai, 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 vai. Vayidaber, right? The Vav is used as a consonant. But sometimes the Vav is only there to tell you the vowel. Like cholam, in the word cholam, right? The Vav is just there to hold up the little dot on top, right? You don't pronounce it, right? Oh, where do we have the word sod? If you look in the box, the right-hand box. The word sod. The box on the right-hand side. You don't say the letter Vav. It's a vowel. It's not a consonant. So you don't say svod, right? You say sod. So these 4 letters, they have, sometimes they're a consonant, sometimes there's a vowel. Now there's another feature, and this is what the last thing I'm going to teach you for today, is that because these are vowels, sometimes they switch. So the word Bereshit, if you would ask me, I would write it like this. B, it's with a shva na. Re, shit. That's it. We have a chirikado, we have a tere, and we have a shva na. Bere, shit. What's the aleph there? It's not there for anything. Really, it should be a yud in there, because the tere has a yud after it. If you look in the third line of the right-hand column, sometimes the tzere has a yud after it, right? So this yud goes together with the tzere, with the 2 dots here. But you know what happened? Instead of the yud, it became an aleph, because the aleph and the yud can switch. You know a word for, what's the first holiday of the year? Rosh Hashanah. How do you spell Rosh Hashanah? The word Rosh is spelled like this. That's strange, really. The word Rosh should be spelled like this. Rosh, right?
Yes.
What happened? The Aleph switches with the Vav. Aleph can switch with the Vav. Any of these four letters, sometimes they switch out with each other. And so it's a little confusing even more. But Rosh, your head, it's written with an Aleph. You don't pronounce the Aleph. The Aleph just serves as a vowel in this case. In the word ve'ahavta, it's a consonant. Ve'ahavta, here it's a consonant. But here it's a vowel and it's a silent vowel, because vowels are silent. They just give you the movement for the consonants. I hope that was clear. I hope that was helpful. For now, we'll let you chew on that for a little bit. There's a lot more to learn about the Shva, and to know when it's a Shva Na and when it's a Shva Nach. But we learned 2 rules, 2 out of the 5. The first one, if it's on the first letter of the word. And the second one we learned the third rule, which is after it's nu agdola. If it's after any of those vowels in the right-hand column, the shva afterwards has a little movement to it. It's called a shva na. Seder? Okay. It's funny, the person who asked the question is not here now. The person who asked me pronunciation was Aaron. He's not here today, but he'll catch up. He can watch it on YouTube. Apparently, people watch this thing. Exactly. We talked about it before you came. You came a little late. They look exactly the same, except in some sidurim, sometimes they help you out. They make this bolded, the kamatz katan, or they make it longer. But in the original notation system, they look exactly the same. One is pronounced A and one's pronounced O. So there's rules for how to learn, how to distinguish them, but most people don't know the rules. So that's why in the new Sidurim, they actually put in a different notation to guide you in proper pronunciation. Good? All right. Let's get back to the laws of Shabbat. Yeah, please, Yisrael.
If one's doing like, I don't mind the different notations, between the newer and the older Sidurim, but I do mind if this affects interpretation, like on a deeper level, if people get worried, because I've read, like in Rabbi Nachman's stories, it is said that Rabbi Nachman told his disciples that if you change one letter from these stories, the message won't be complete.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, so perhaps this notation interferes in...
Sometimes, no, the new notation doesn't change anything. It just helps you read properly. If anything, it brings you back to the original pronunciation that should be done, just people are ignorant of this. They don't know that there's nu agdola, nu aktana, shvana. People don't know any of this. So you could read these rules, like you could memorize the 5 rules here and the 4 rules here, and then when you read, you put them into practice. Or it's like having crutches. The new notations, it's like training wheels to teach you how to pronounce it properly. But it's a nice feature. Most people are not so careful about pronunciation, except when you get to Shema Yisrael and reading from the Torah. Reading from the Torah, people like to be careful that it should be pronounced properly. But in the Siddur, all of the Siddur, you should be pronouncing all of your prayers properly. You can learn it. They should teach this in Ulpan. I don't know why they don't teach it in Ulpan. But you got it. Now it's a keeper. You keep it and refer back to it. I can explain to the rest of it to you another day if you want. Be'ezrat Hashem. Let's go back to the laws of Shabbat. Today we're starting a new topic. The topic is called Hotza'ah. Hotza'ah it literally means taking out. Taking out, like you see in some buildings, there's a sign in green or in red, a big sign, there's actually a law. If you walk outside the door, you must have, it's a new law, code, a fire code. You have to have a big sign that says Yetziah. What does Yetziah mean? You see it in big red letters or green letters? Yetziah means exit. Exit. You have to show where the exits are so people in a time of fire. So the word Yetziah means exit, and Hotza'ah means taking things out. We usually call it in English carrying, and I'll explain why in presently. But we're chapter 21 in the book of the laws of Shabbat in Pnei Halacha. Chapter 21 is called Hotza'ah, and let's just start reading a little bit, and then we'll expand upon it. Who can read for us? Chaim, go for it. Great, we got a volunteer.
The melacha of Hotza'ah consists of transporting an object from a private domain to a public domain, or vice versa, or transporting an object more than 4 amot in a public domain.
Actually, he snuck in there 2 different topics, right? One is, there's something called a private and a public domain, and you cannot transport an item from one to the other or backwards. Public to private, private to public, forbidden. That's one part of the prohibition of carrying. The second part is, you're not going in between or out, in or out. You're out. Where are you? You're in the public domain. You're in the street. If you have something in your hands or in your pocket, and you carry it 4 amot, the length of 4 amot, it's a prohibition. You didn't transfer anything in or out. Right? That's why the word hotza'ah focuses on part A. That's taking in or out. It's forbidden. In English, the word we usually use is the best word for part B. Part B is carrying, even if you don't take it in or out. The fact that you traverse in the public domain more than 4 amot is part B of the prohibition. So there's 2 parts of the prohibition. One is taking in and out. The other one is transporting in a public domain. Yes?
Also with Eruv.
No.
Okay.
No, we're going to talk about Eruv in a few minutes. The Eruv allows you to do both of these, to these prohibitions. Okay, let's keep reading, please, Chaim.
During the 6 weekdays, man's role is to perform melachot in order to improve and develop the world, to craft tools and instruments, build houses, and cultivate crops for food and textiles. The highest purpose of each and every melacha is to build the Mishkan and the Mikdash, in which God's presence can dwell. Despite the tremendous value of work, the Torah commands us to refrain from all melacha on Shabbat in order to explore the foundations of faith and to study Torah. In this way, the work that we do all week long is imbued with deeper significance. It has the power to bring the world closer to perfection and establish within it a Mikdash for the Lord God of Israel. The novelty of Hotza'ah is that an act that does not physically alter an object can still be considered a melacha. Even changing its location in some substantive way is considered a melacha. Location is thus of paramount importance. There is nothing in the world that does not have a location, a place. When an item is in its place, it has a purpose. When it is not, it is unimportant. For example, in a place with no water, water is very valuable, while in a place with plenty of water, its value declines. Furthermore, nothing can exist without a place to be. This explains why God is referred to as home, place, because he ensures the world's continued existence and provides a place for it to be. When the sages discussed each type of place, they used the word reshut, property, authority, domain, since every object exists by the authority of the place where it rests. We find in the Torah that the donations for the Mishkan were collected from each individual's private domain, Reshut Yachid, and were brought to the public domain, Reshut HaRabim, where the Mishkan was built. This was considered a Melacha, as the verse states explicitly. Moshe then ordered that the proclamation be made throughout the encampment. Let no man or woman make further effort, Melacha, on behalf of the donations of the sanctuary. And the people stopped bringing. According to Torah law, there are 3 types of domains: a private domain, Reshut Yachid, HaYahid, a public domain, Reshut HaRabim, and an exempt area, Machon Meir. The sages decreed that most places defined by Torah law as a Machon Meir would have the status of a public domain. Such a rabbinically defined public domain is called a Carmelit.
Okay, so we have 4 reshuyot, 4 areas when it comes to the laws of Shabbat. Okay, I'll put them on the board. Everybody should know them. We're going to use the terms. I can erase this, right? I can erase this. What are the 4 areas? Good. Reshut literally means permission, so but it's like a place that's under. Reshut HaYachid is the permission for an individual. Yachid means an individual, like the word echad, right? Reshut HaYachid is the private domain, we call it. Reshut HaRabim. Rabim, we know, is plural, so it's many, so it's the public, the communal. Public domain versus private domain. Right, this is private domain, is a nice way of saying area, and this is public domain. It's a public place. Then we have 2 more. Pretty much everything else gets divided into 2. Once you have the public domain and private domain are very clearly defined, everything which doesn't fit into the category of either the private or the public is one of 2 options. It's either a makom pitur, which means permitted place or exempt place, or a new creation called a Carmelit. Carmelit is a rabbinic. This is rabbinic. It's rabbinically prohibited to carry there. It's like a rabbinic public domain. The rabbis decided that even though some areas don't actually fit into the rules of a public domain, we're going to be stringent and give them the rules of a public domain. As we said before, you're not allowed to carry, to traverse any 4 amot, we'll see in a minute, in a public domain, so you're not allowed to rabbinically in a Carmelit. Makom Ptur remains something which is exempt. You're allowed to carry there. We'll see it's a very small place. So these are the 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. The 4 reshuyot for Shabbat, the 4 areas, the 4 domains, if you will. Good? What's an example of a private domain? That's right. That's right. A house. A house is 4 walls, even without the roof. The fact that you have 4 walls around it, or a fence, you have any fenced-in area, it's a private domain. So you mentioned before, you already know there's such a thing called an eruv. An eruv is like a makeshift wall or a proper fence around an area. You can even take an entire city and you put a wall around it, or a makeshift wall. Basically, you're creating one big private domain. It's like a house. It's like one big house because of that fence around it, or the makeshift fence. We'll see how that is made a little bit later. Okay, but if you don't have an eruv, so then you have houses. And what do you have in between houses? Okay. And what else is there? Let's say here, I'm going to draw a little city, okay? This is a house. Here's another house. The truth is, many times houses are inside a courtyard. And then the courtyard has a little gate here. And then here is the main road. Okay, so this is a private domain. This is also a private domain because there's a fence around the courtyard, right? This is the yard. This is a house. So they're both private domains because this one has a fence around the yard as well, common yard. But then we get to the street, that already is public domain. If your house is directly on, you walk out of your house into the public domain, then you're in trouble. You can't take anything in and out of your house because you're going from the private domain to the public domain. Okay? Now there's rules about, we said a house, 4 walls. Keep it simple. What are the rules for a public domain? Here we have a few criterion. One is that we learn these definitions of the spaces from the Jewish people in the desert when they came out of Egypt. They were given the laws of Shabbat for the first time. So we learn out what's considered a private domain and a public domain from there. And there, how many people were there in the desert, according to the Torah?
600,000.
600,000. 600,000 people walking. So many authorities hold that unless there's so much traffic in the public domain that there's 600,000 people a day which pass through, some big highways have 600,000 people easy every day. That's considered a public domain. But if it doesn't qualify as an official public domain. Another rule is that it has to be wide. How wide? Well, we know that in the desert, they carried wagons filled with beams of wood for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle. And we know exactly how they were built. Basically, we get to the width of the highway in the desert was 16 amot, cubits wide. A cubit is about 50 centimeters, basically 8 meters wide. The road, for it to be defined as a public domain, biblically, it has to have traffic, 600,000 people, and it has to be 8 meters wide, approximately. Okay? So in some big cities, you have a public domain. In most small towns and villages around the world, you don't have what's called a biblical public domain. There's not enough people, the road's not wide enough, dirt road, well, it doesn't matter whether it's paved or not, but it's enough room for 1 car, 2 cars. Usually you don't get to 8 meters. It's pretty wide. So if it's not an official public domain, the rabbi said it's prohibited. Rabbinically, it's going to be called a public domain. You're still not allowed to take things out of your house, even if it's not a biblical public domain. It's a rabbinic public domain. It's called Carmelit. The Carmelit word is used only in rabbinic literature as a rabbinic public domain, basically. That's what it's used for. In Israel, you were just living in Haifa.
I was.
In Haifa, it was a big excitement about 50 years ago for the first time, they divide, Haifa's it's on the coast, right? And it's got a big, big hill. What's it called? Carmel Mountain. The Carmel Mountain, that's a mountain range, really. Carmel Mountains. And they decided, wouldn't it be cool? Let's get a cable car. So 50 years ago, it's the first time Israel, major engineering feat, they created a cable car. Recently, in the last year or two, they refurbished it. After 50 years, it was out of use for many, many years. Now it's a modern transportation system. It's still a cable car, but people use it. Then it was a tourist attraction, right? Guess what they called the cable car on the Carmel Mountain? Carmelit. Carmelit. It's the name of a cable car on the Carmel Mountain. It has nothing to do with the laws of Shabbat. It has nothing to do with the usage that has been the Jewish usage of the term for thousands of years. But it is a cable car on the Carmel Mountain. Chaim, will you get up and show everybody where Haifa is on the map?
Yes.
Behind us we have a map. Just stand to the side. So everybody can, where's Jerusalem? Just show us where's Jerusalem. Very good. Wow, you were living all the way up there?
Yes.
Was it cold?
Yeah, it was a little chilly.
Actually, Jerusalem's colder than
It's colder
Haifa.
because we don't have the sea
I see, yeah.
acting as a sink.
Nice.
But,
So that's Haifa, that big, that little check mark, the little U, right. And the Carmel Mountains,
Yeah,
it's right there.
University.
It's right there, yeah, exactly. So there's a Carmelit, which is a cable car there. It's called the Carmelit. But it has nothing to do with what we're saying now about the laws of Shabbat, okay?
I was in the Carmel,
You were there?
but it looks very like on the ground in England. Because I was like, hey, it's like on the ground in UK.
Right. What's the big deal? Yeah, but you go up. Very cool. I've never been on the new one. I think maybe 45 years ago I was on it.
The better one is they have a cable car from the main bus station up to the university. A proper cable car, gondola, and you
Yeah.
get all the views. That's worth doing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. It's also called the Carmelite, or
No, it's called the Rakevelit.
Rakabelit, right. Rakevet is train. Rakevel, well, the word kevel is like cable, so it's on a cable. So they call it a rakbelit. It's a tiny little.
There's also Yeshuv close near Carmelit.
No, the yeshuv is called Carmel.
No, not Carmel. You know Sansana?
Yeah.
It's close to there, Carmelit.
Really?
No.
I think it's called Carmel.
Carmel. No.
There is a yeshuv called Carmel. I don't think there's a yeshuv called
No,
Carmel.
it is outside the border, like outside the green line.
Interesting. Okay, but still, I don't think there's a yeshuv called Carmelit. There's a yeshuv called Carmel.
Yeah, this is in Yehuda, but outside Yehuda.
There's an additional yeshuv called Carmelit. Wow, cool.
No, I think so.
Maybe Kramim. Kramim is something else.
Kramim,
Kramim is something else. Carmel is actually a word in the Torah. It refers to wheat when it is ripe. It's called Carmel. The kernels of the wheat are full. Our sages explain that it comes from the word kar maleh. Kar is like a pillow. Mal is maleh, so it's a full pillow, like a pillow that's stuffed with feathers. So it's very full. So that's when the wheat is ripe, because the kernel gets bigger and bigger until it's nice and ripe. And then you have a wheat berry. That's Carmel.
A sukkah would be a private domain.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, I know you're building it.
Absolutely.
property, but
Yeah, regardless of whether it belongs to you or not, if it has the four walls, yeah. We're going to see that there's even maybe 3 walls are good enough, just like a sukkah. That doesn't have to have full 4 walls. But let's see. So that's the... Rav Melamed has a nice interpretation of why this is prohibited. But before we do that, we have to explain what a Makom P'tur is. Makom P'tur are small places which, I'm giving you the bottom line, which are not useful for very much. Take a look at the bottom of page 108, excuse me. 108 at the bottom. Rocks higher than 3 tfachim and less than 4 tfachim wide, or a small pillar, which is just a table height or less. It was not included in the decree because it's fundamentally different from the other domains. It's over 3 tfachim, so it's not part of the ground. It's less than 4 tfachim wide, so it's not big enough to be significant. So no one will make the mistake of thinking that one may carry in an insignificant makom p'tur. One may also carry in a larger and more significant place. So basically little podiums or a small place. Right? Here we have, it's got to be less than 10 tfachim from the ground. It's got to be less than 10 tfachim. And it's got to be less than 4 tfachim wide. So basically, any little mound, you have sometimes, you know what you have to block cars from going into a road? Right? They put these sort of, what do you call them? Blockades, yeah. So each one of these, they're very short. They're just to stop cars. So on Shabbat, if you needed to carry, if you had one right next to your house, you could put from your house onto the Makom P'tor, and you're allowed to take it off of the Makom P'tor to somewhere else. Sometimes it could be useful when, sometimes you get into those situations where you need to move something. You can use a Makom P'tor. But as I said, they're very small and insignificant, and that's why they're not prohibited. Again, rabbinically. Biblically, it's quite strict rules. It's either a public domain or a private domain. Private domain, you got to have the walls. Public domain, it's got to be 16 amot wide, 600,000 people. If it's neither, it's a Carmelit. Except for these small, insignificant places, which is a Makom P'tur. Okay, Pinchas, we read for us the top of page 109. The reason behind the prohibition of carrying 4 amot in, wait. In Reshut HaRabim, right, we're moving ahead, but we said taking things in or out, we learn it out from in the desert. The Jews took their gold and silver and they donated it to the temple. They gathered them all in the public place. So they were taking their stuff through a public domain to get to where they were going to do all the craftsmanship to build the Mishkan. Either way, they were taking things in and out. And Moshe, the pasuk says, "Al yotzi ish mimkomo b'yom Shabbat." You're not allowed to take things out on the Shabbat day. So that's pretty clear. But what about when you're in the public domain? Carrying is prohibited. Let's see what Rav Melamed says about that from a spiritual perspective. Page 109, that's section 4 in chapter 21.
As we have seen, one may not transport objects from one domain to another within a provided domain. Even in a nice house with many rooms, one will move objects around freely. Because the entire Reshut HaYachid is considered one domain, moving items within it is not considered transporting them from one domain to another. In contrast, in Reshut HaRabim, one will move an object within his 4 arms. Since Reshut HaRabim is communal, individual make use of only the 4 amos he occupies. 4 amos is non-space for one to lie down with your hands and legs outstretched. You are most
An item.
an atom. An atom in your side of the 4 amos. So you have moved it from his face to the communion. Rabbi is protected by Torah law.
Yafeh, thank you. So everybody has personal space. It's a big thing nowadays in Western society, right? Don't get too close to me. For sure, don't touch me. But even don't get too close. There's different cultural differences between different countries and what's too close. Halacha, it's defined. You have 4 amot. 4 amot. Doesn't mean you can't enter somebody's, but the concept is to take something in Rishut Harabim from one place to another is if you traverse more than 4 amot. 4 amot, it's leaving the space that it's in now. 4 amot, and amma, as I said, is about 50 centimeters, so 4 amot is 2 meters. 2 meters, a box of 2 meters around you. From a spiritual perspective, it should be noted that all the confusion and corruption in the world stems from division. Nations fight one another, people compete with each other, and ideological movements struggle with one another. Thus, tremendous amounts of energy are wasted on strife and contention. Even an individual is often torn between seemingly contradictory desires. The way to rectify these tensions is to reveal the unity underlying all existence. With belief that one God created the entire world, we can understand that all the different desires in the world are directed toward one goal. Only by following the Torah's directions can we harmonize them and thus improve and perfect the world. 109. Now we can understand why the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself is considered a major Torah principle. Who said that? Do you remember? Rabbi Akiva. It bridges the world's fissures and helps reveal its fundamental unity. Now we are in a position to understand why objects may be carried in Reshut HaYachid. In a sense, a Reshut HaYachid is a perfected place. The walls that enclose it give it a unity of purpose. Thus, all its rooms and the areas within it are considered in one place, within which items may be carried. In contrast, a Reshut Harabim has yet to be perfected. It still expresses the different interests of many people, and the objects found within it are not yet considered in one place. That is why carrying anything more than 4 amot in Reshut Harabim is considered a melacha. It's a nice explanation. But whatever the explanation is, we're not allowed to carry on Shabbat. Okay? There's some details here. I don't think we're going to get into all the details because we're really just doing a short overview of the laws of Shabbat. But what we're going to skip ahead to is in practice. If you look at page well, he doesn't have a clear place where he describes an Eruv, but let me explain it to you then outside. What is an Eruv? We mentioned that an Eruv is when you basically create one big Reshut Harabim. Big house. That's one big house. If you have walls all around it. But walls are expensive to make walls. So there are rules in the Talmud that follow the basic principles follows, right? Do we have 4 walls in this room?
Yes.
Not all of it is surrounded by walls.
Why?
We have a door.
It's just like in the
The
wall.
door is in the wall. And we say it's part of the wall, right? The door is part of the wall. It can be open, it can be shut. How do you define a door? We say it's a doorway. Right? So it's still a wall even though it has a door in it? Okay. What if I had, look, there's another door. It's still a wall, right? What if I had not one door or two doors, three doors?
Also a wall.
Also a wall. Four doors.
Also
100 doors.
also
Also a wall. Basically, you can have an entire wall made up of doors.
in glass.
Whether in the ancient world they didn't have glass. Basically, a window was a hole in the wall that you would stop it up with a piece of cardboard or whatever they had, wood, and they'd take it off. And there was no glass. That's we're very rich that we have glass that you can see through, get light, even though it's closed. We're very rich nowadays. Look at these. We can see the light. Sunlight comes in, and we can see out. But we're still warm because it's keeping the cold out. That's a very modern invention. But basically, a door that we have hinges. It's so easy. They had hinges too, but it wasn't as easy. Anyways, the point is, if you have 100 doors, it's still a wall. Well, how do you define a door? Basically, you define a doorway. A door, because the inside, like I was saying with windows, they didn't have all the doors. Sometimes the door was just a hole in the wall. Was a hole which had a left door post and a right door post, and I think we call it, what's it called? A lintel on top. So 2 doorposts and a lintel is all you need to create a doorway. So you have 100 doorways, that's a wall. If you have 100 doors, 100 doorways. If they're all close to each other, that's considered a wall. So the cheapest way to make a wall is to make doors, or not doors, but doorways. How do you make doorways? A post on the right, post on the left, and a lintel. So we make doorways all around our cities. Wherever there's a Jewish community that cares about the laws of Shabbat, in order to be able to take your key in and out of the house, in order to carry your baby carriage in and out of the house, to go to shul, to carry a siddur, a talit, you can't do that, even if it's not a wide road. Even if you don't have 600,000, it's still rabbinically prohibited. It's rabbinically prohibited. Most rabbis allow you to create a makeshift wall with doorways. The cheapest way to make a doorway is everything gets a definition in halakha. The halakha is that this lintel doesn't have to be very strong. It doesn't have to be made of wood or cement or metal or anything like that. It can even be a string. As long as it has the frame, it has the shape of a doorway, it's kosher. And so in many cities, they actually have fences all around. The fence is kosher. But if you can't make a fence, basically you take a string, a wire, and you put up a post on the right and a post on the left, or every few meters, every 10 meters, every 20 meters, and you string a wire from one post to the next post, and you create a doorway. And then you put another post, and create another doorway. And another post, you create another doorway. So basically you're stringing a wire all the way around, and you're creating walls with doorways. And that's called, in modern Hebrew, that's in the way we speak, it's called an eruv. An eruv means it's mixed. It mixes together. Everything that's inside is considered to be one domain. One Reshut HaYachid, one big private domain. It's surrounded by walls. It's got 4 walls. It's a private domain. So we use these wires or strings there's a lot of details exactly how, what's considered, how high does the post have to be, how taut does the string have to be. There's books written on the subject of how to create an eruv. Okay, but the concept is we create one big a private domain by walls. Walls can be doorways. Doorways can be strings, wires on top of posts. That's the basic concept of an eruv. Most rabbis allow you, and they say it's a good thing to have an eruv. I'll take questions in just a minute. It's based on the understanding that what we have today is, in most places, we don't have a Reshut Harabim from the Torah. We have a Carmelite. It's only rabbinically prohibited. And that's why we're more lenient to make this sort of makeshift. It's not a real wall. It's a wire, doorways. And so we're lenient because of the assumption that most cities are. Now the question becomes, what happens if you have a very big city like New York City? Or even Jerusalem. It's pretty big, 1.5 million citizens in Jerusalem. We have Begin Boulevard. It's wider than 8 meters wide. We've got highways in the middle of the city. And but I was late today because of traffic. Lots of people are on those highways. Maybe we even have 600,000 a day. So can you make an Eruv in a major modern city where you have wide roads? You might even have a Reshut HaRabim from the Torah. Can you still surround it with makeshift walls and therefore are allowed to carry? So most rabbis say that it's a good idea. It's a good idea, although there's room to argue about it. And so you'll have some people who say, we're going to make an Eruv, we're going to spend millions of dollars. You can imagine to surround all of Jerusalem with a wire and posts, and then the wire can fall down, so you've got to check it. That's already manpower. That's already a lot of work hours are put into making an Eruv around Jerusalem. We spend the millions of dollars to make an Eruv around the city. Some people say that's to make sure that if people are not aware, they don't know any better, that they should not be violating a Torah law, that they should not be carrying in Reshut HaRabim or taking things in or out. But for me personally, the rabbi will say, I want to be machmir. I want to be stringent. And I'm going to avoid carrying. I won't take my talit with me to shul. How are they going to wear? Have you ever seen anybody wearing a talit on the road, outside?
Yes.
Why do they do that? Because they don't want to carry it in their hands. Even though there's an Eruv, they're machmir. They're stringent. They don't want to rely on the leniency of an Eruv. Because it's a big city, maybe it's a Reshut HaRabim Doraita, and an Eruv only really works, according to all opinions, if it's a Carmelite, if it's a rabbinic domain, if it's only rabbinically prohibited. So you'll see that many times we do make great efforts to make an Eruv. Many poskim say you can rely on an Eruv even in a major city. In Chicago, in Washington, D.C., they have an Eruv, I'm sure. Wherever there's a major Jewish community, they spend lots of money to put up this makeshift Eruv or makeshift walls. And people carry, they carry their keys, their talit, whatever it is. But you're always going to find some rabbis, some people that who their rabbi told them, it's best not to rely on the Eruv. Why? Because maybe it's a Reshut HaRabim Doraita, it's such a major city, it's so big, maybe we shouldn't rely on the Eruv. And it's a good idea. It's a good idea. There's other leniencies which are used, making this makeshift doorways, and so they don't want to rely on any leniencies. It's the laws of Shabbat, and so they're stringent. They don't carry anything in their pockets, no tissues, no keys, and they have a sidur in the Beit Knesset. I don't have to bring my own. I'll use that one. Or before Shabbat, if you want to use your own, you put it there before Shabbat, so that when you get there, you're able to use it. And that's the idea of the modern day Eruv. This doorway is called Tzurat HaPetach. Petach is a doorway. Tzura is the frame, the form of a doorway. The form Tzurat HaPetach. That's what it's called. That's an official word. What the proper term for an Eruv is Tzurat HaPetach. Yes.
Why we can make an Eruv about the whole country?
Good question.
Because then it's like, then you can, on Shabbat, you can walk to other Yeshua.
Right, that would be nice. First of all, it could be very expensive. Second of all, the problem is that there's more than 600,000 people for sure in the country, right? There's 6 million, there's 8 million people in the country, right? And also there's big highways, and not only highways, there's big open spaces. The big open spaces where there's fields, nobody walks there, so there's a problem making that area part of the Eruv. And so we can't do it on such a large scale. But that's a good question. Other questions around the room? Somebody, Stephen, yeah.
Rabbi, because Jerusalem is so big, the Eruv,
Yeah.
could it be some community there?
Yes, exactly. It's not only could be, it is actually is. There is a smaller Eruv around one or two neighborhoods. But people say, we don't want to rely on the big one. The big one might include Begin, but I don't live near Begin, near the highway. I live at a small, like Harnof. Kiryat Moshe. Kiryat Moshe has an Eruv around Kiryat Moshe. It's connected on one road. The road is, I think, on, I think it's Kanfei Nesharim and Beit Tadfus, but I'm not sure. Those roads, there's an Eruv all the way, and then all of Harnof is connected, is in an Eruv. Yes, there are some individual communities, they put up an Eruv within an Eruv. There's one which is for all of Jerusalem, which some people rely on, and some people don't want to rely on, so they say, oh, I'll make a smaller one just for my community. There's no fields in my small neighborhood, there's no highways in my neighborhood, and so the Eruv around my neighborhood for sure kosher. And so you have some people that only carry in their specific neighborhood, but not outside of it. There are many Eruvs in Jerusalem, yes.
Can you use pre-existing, like can you use
Yes.
highway overpass, power lines?
Yes. Power lines. And so here it gets where it's getting to more details. It's complicated. There's a rule that says that the lintel has to be on top of the doorpost, not on, like going on the side of, sometimes you have in power lines, you have that the lines are hanging on the side, and that's not as kosher. It's still kosher on some level, but so there's a lot of details going into it. But if at all possible, we use existing fences, existing walls, retaining walls, and all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah.
One other question, there's a food piece too, isn't there?
Good. This we're going to cover tomorrow.
Okay.
Tomorrow, I want to show you that there's an entire another usage of the term Eruv, and that is, we're going to see it in the last chapter, chapter 30. We're going to skip to chapter 30 tomorrow. But before that, and that's really where the word Eruv is the proper term. The proper term for what we've been talking about is Tzurat HaPetach, the form of a doorway. When it comes to carrying, let's say you find yourself not in Jerusalem, or you're not in a place where there's a lot of Jewish people that have created such an Eruv. So you're not allowed to carry. So wait a minute. I can't have anything in my pockets either. Am I allowed to wear a coat? Am I allowed to wear a kippah, a hat? So clothing that you wear is allowed. Items that serve the body, you're allowed to wear glasses. It's a problem with sunglasses because sunglasses, you might take them off. You take them on and off all the time. If you're not aware and you're outside the Eruv, right? You know of no Eruv, you're in the public domain, it's rabbinically prohibited to carry, maybe you'll take off your sunglasses when it gets cloudy and you'll put them in your pocket and you'll walk. Rabbinic prohibition. So you have to be careful not to carry. There's some items which are considered clothing. Whatever is considered clothing is allowed. And jewelry also. Jewelry is allowed.
What about something like a cane or a walking stick?
It's a big problem.
Oh.
It's a big problem. Right? Because you carry it. You're holding it. Take a look on page 125. If one is partially disabled, needs a cane to walk, he may walk in a Reshut Rabbin with a cane, because the cane is the same status as his shoes, indispensable for walking. However, if he can walk without a cane, as I think most people most even old people can, even if only with great difficulty, he may not enter the rabbin with his cane, right? So if it's like a prosthetic limb, it's attached to your body, that's what enables you to walk. So that's fine. But a cane is more a problem. Of course, a blind person can't manage without it, so that's allowed. A blind person can carry. There's a lot of details here. We're not going to go into all of them. But basically, if you find yourself in a place that does not have an eruv, you better find yourself a rabbi to ask your questions, because there's it's complicated.
But if you go to for Shabbat to you visit friends and after you ask them,
Yes, that's right. If you find yourself in a new town that you've never been to before and you don't live there, you have to ask your hosts, is there an eruv in this town? If it's a major city in Israel, almost all of them, anywhere where there's a big Jewish community, there is an eruv, although not everywhere in Europe has it, but in America most towns have an eruv, and in Israel most towns have an eruv. But it's good to ask. It's good to ask. Some places they don't. It's a small group of caravans on a hill somewhere. They created a nice community, but maybe they didn't make an eruv. So you can't take things in and out. You have to always make sure that you put your hat on before you walk out the door. You can't just carry your hat outside the door and put it on. Wearing a watch, most people say, you wear it it's considered like jewelry. You don't usually take it on and off, so you can wear a watch. It's considered to be clothing or jewelry. But there's a lot of details. So, as I said, stick to big Jewish communities and you're okay. And if not, find yourself a rabbi to ask your questions to. How to carry in and out on the Shabbat without violating the prohibition of carrying on Shabbat. The two parts, in and out, and within public domain, traversing 4 amot, the 2 meters outside, taking anything outside of its 2 meters is prohibited. Tomorrow we're going to skip to chapter 30 and find out what the word eruv means. Chapter 30 is lots of pictures. It's the one chapter in the book that has pictures. So we'll see briefly chapter 30, and then we'll go back and finish up the remaining 7 chapters we have. Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, we'll stop here. Questions? Good?